I have no confidence in Notre Dame beating Ohio State.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football on this National Championship Monday. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in this, the greatest sport on planet Earth, and it's the last game today. I'm fine. I'm totally fine, guys. Everything's going to be okay because it's brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting right now. New customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets. If you win your first bet, visit FanDuel.com to get started. Hope you didn't bet on Mark Andrews to not drop that particular pass, but they've got a bunch of other stuff as well, including an 8.5-point spread in favor of Ohio State in the national championship game. That's absolutely, positively warranted because Ohio State is a significantly better team on paper, of course. Plus, Curt Cignetti makes a comment that I found interesting, shall we say, about the college football playoff and the ACC. The ACC might change its championship game structure, but we start with the national championship game today. So, Ohio State has every ability to make this not Georgia TCU from 2022, but in that same sort of vein. The biggest thing that can get in Ohio State's way is Ohio State. That's what happened against Texas. When they are playing to their full potential, it's the Oregon game, it's the Tennessee game. That's what it looks like. But if they commit some penalties that are silly or unnecessary, or if they decide not to throw the ball down the field or can't find a way to get those shots to take off, if they do those things, Notre Dame's got a chance. But this is an incredibly narrow path to victory. I can think of several different ways in which this game plays out that results in an Ohio State win, including a close game, by the way. Yeah, they lost a tight one to Michigan, but they won a tight one against Texas. Remember, that was a one-possession game basically the entire time. And then what did the Ohio State defense do? What they have done all season. They've been the best red zone defense maybe I have ever seen. It is truly uncanny how good they are schematically and fundamentally, and their film study shows through inside the 5-yard line more than anywhere else. So the biggest problem I have wrapping my head around Notre Dame, I would like for them to keep it close. I want an exciting game. I'm just not expecting that because I struggle to see how Notre Dame is going to put up a lot of points here. I don't even think they're going to get to 20. I think it's going to be a struggle to reach 17. Now, Michigan, as we all recall, had a game against Ohio State in which both teams were under 17 points, and they ended up winning, and that was on the road. This will be a neutral site, of course. So, yes, there is a formula, there is a blueprint, there is a way that Notre Dame wins the game. I just have no confidence in that happening, maybe even because it already happened once. You think about how impactful that Michigan game was. It lit a fire under Ohio State and might just propel them to the national championship game because they've been a different looking football team since then. They haven't been tight. They haven't been trying to do things that they aren't great at necessarily or trying to be something they're not. They've been leaning into their strengths, or at least trying to. They got away from that a little bit against Texas. But Notre Dame's offense is the biggest reason when they're going against Ohio State's defense, they throw for less than 200 yards a game. Last team to win a national championship doing that, 2009 Alabama. If you thought Michigan was a run-heavy team, Notre Dame can't throw the ball as well as Michigan did last year. And they didn't do it a whole heck of a lot. J.J. McCarthy didn't light the world on fire to beat Washington in the national championship game. But what's different about that is Washington didn't have a balanced offensive attack. They were very pass-heavy. They were the best passing team in all of college football, of course. That's why they were in the national championship game. But if you go and scheme your way to taking the Buckeyes passing attack and reducing it down from what it's capable of being, they still have other ways to kill you. They can hit you with the quick game. They can run the football a little bit. They can rip off explosive plays with the running backs. They've just got so many ways to hurt you. Run, throw, intermediate, short, deep. I just see so many weapons, and Notre Dame can't let this get into a shootout. They absolutely cannot. If this becomes a who can score more, Notre Dame can't do it. They don't throw the ball effectively. Ohio State's run defense has been exceptionally good this year. I just look at the way that Buckeye defense is playing, particularly 4 guys. Narrowing it down to about a third of the defense. Statistically, just over a third of the defense. But not necessarily the names that you may know. But Lathan Ransom at safety, along with Caleb Downs, are incredibly good in coverage. Downs had that late interception against Texas once they went up 14 after the Jack Sawyer strip sack and return for a touchdown. And those 2 guys have been great. Cody Simon, a linebacker, phenomenal all postseason long. He was especially lethal in the Rose Bowl matchup with Oregon. And then Tyleik Williams on the interior of the defensive line. These guys up the middle are making plays in the running game over and over and over again. If Notre Dame cannot run the football in this game, it will be ugly. This will be a crooked score in which Notre Dame fails to reach 10 points. Now, I'm not predicting that. I think Ohio State wins the game 28-13. I don't know that it always feels that close. I hope it does. I really, really do. This is not me coming on here and tearing in to be some anti-Notre Dame guy. I've picked them to win every game in the playoff before this, and I have been 3-0 in my picks against the spread for Notre Dame in this playoff stretch. They've done what I thought they would. I talked about them at the end of the regular season. They were quietly playing some of the best football in the country. They just didn't have the high-profile games to always show it. Now in the playoff they have, but this is where rubber meets the road, and Notre Dame is just not able to go toe-to-toe with Ohio State. If the Buckeyes play even a B game, I don't think Notre Dame can get up for that. Now, if Ohio State goes out and plays a D-plus game, yeah, Notre Dame can go out and win it outright. I have no confidence in that happening. I think the coaching combination of Ryan Day, Chip Kelly, and Jim Knowles, they've been phenomenal this postseason. Marcus Freeman, I have said, continue to say, has been the best head coach in the entire college football playoff. But they've overachieved. With the talent they have and the roster, the way that they play and how they've been winning football games, it's great. It's been awesome to watch. It's been a coaching clinic. At some point, you play a team that can coach at a high level with high-level players on both sides of the ball. And I think Notre Dame's defense can keep them around in the game. I do not believe the offense will do enough to allow them to win the game. So give me the Buckeyes to win and cover the 8.5. Notre Dame has been a phenomenal story, but that comes to a close tonight in the national championship game. Speaking of great stories, that's what Indiana was this year. They were the story in college football, and Curt Cignetti is sounding off on it. I'm here for it. I'm here for the Curt Cignetti saltiness. I like this guy a lot. And I like Prize Picks too. They're bringing this message to you and this show to you because they're the place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings, Prize Picks has changed the game in daily fantasy sports. Whether it's the playoffs or regular season, Prize Picks has made it easier than ever to win big while enjoying all the football action. Now it's playoff time. There's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks. Here's how it works. You simply pick more or less on at least 2 players, and if your picks hit, you could win up to 1,000 times your cash. That's right, 1,000 times your cash just by making a few simple picks. Now, if you had taken, Mark Andrews to drop a ball in a 2-point, they don't have things that specific, but they've got everything else that you could possibly want. And if you think you know who's popping off in the NFL playoffs, yeah, you need to go check out Prize Picks. Ready to run your game this football season? Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 just for playing. Don't wait. Take your game to the next level with Prize Picks. Prize Picks, run your game. So Curt Cignetti is back. I hope he never leaves college football. We know he's going back to Indiana because they gave him a big extension before the season even closed, wisely so, or else someone might have tried to scoop him up. But Billy Napier also didn't get fired from Florida, outperformed expectations, so that perhaps ensured that it wasn't going to happen. But Curt Cignetti was chatting, as he often does, about many things, not just, how good he thinks this team or that team is in the Big Ten and whatnot in front of a basketball crowd. But here's what he had to say about the college football playoff. This is a piece by Ross Dellinger over at Yahoo. Quote, "I think everybody thought we were a great story until the college football playoff rankings came out. And then everybody's self-interest took over, and then it became political." End quote. Sign me up, all the way up to the clouds for this sort of honesty from coaches, because of course it did. He didn't tiptoe around it. He didn't say, well, people make comments, people do this. He's saying, no, we were a great story, and then people wanted to use us as a punchline. And this comes in the context, by the way, of Indiana's 2 losses coming at the hands of the 2 teams that are about to play for the national championship. Curt Cignetti has got every right to go out there, as any coach does. Any coach has the right to go out there and defend his team. It's just with certain folks, Lane Kiffin, you can take it a bridge too far. Cignetti is absolutely in the right to say, yeah, it feels like it got really political. Yeah, it did. Because Indiana became the punching bag, the low-hanging fruit. You know why? Because they were first. Remember how the first round of the playoff went? Indiana played on a Friday, and then everyone else played on Saturday. It was 1 game on Friday in South Bend, and then 3 games on Saturday. When you have a standalone component like that to a playoff structure, you remember it more. You see this a lot in the NFL. Bunch of games are played each week. They all count for the same number of wins. But which ones get discussed more on talk shows the next day? Sunday Night Football. Which is the most watched? Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football, or Thursday Night Football. Because they have their own window for people to pay attention to. There's nothing else to distract. You can't have the equivalent of a political Friday news dump where you say, oh, this isn't a great story for us, so let's throw it out on a Friday and hope it gets lost in the shuffle during the weekend. No, it stood on its own. So Indiana took all sorts of blowback, all sorts of pushback. Kirk Herbstreit was not naming them on ESPN after Tennessee was blown out by Ohio State, by the way, but he was saying, well, I hope the committee doesn't just look at wins. I hope the committee that. So let me get this straight. Indiana rolls through, only plays a close game with Michigan. That was the only single-digit game that they had that was a win all year. And Michigan, by the way, ended up being an 8-win football team, especially in the second half of the season. They were a much improved unit from what they were over the first half. Indiana won that game, by the way. Then they go to Columbus, and they lose to Ohio State by fewer points than Tennessee did out of the almighty SEC. And then they go to Notre Dame, and they lose by 10 points, and they have the smallest margin of defeat of any first-round playoff team. But they were taking all of that flack. So yes, I am fully with Curt Cignetti here, that he has every single right to go out there and say, yeah, you guys were kind of taking us and making us political, but look who we lost to. Look how we lost to them. How's everybody else faring? Not so easy, is it? No. Turns out it is not. Remember, Indiana played a closer game against Ohio State in Columbus than Tennessee. That is not me saying Tennessee wasn't actually any good. That is me saying Indiana was actually good. Because if Indiana had a maize and blue helmet throughout the course of this year, the discussion wouldn't have been nearly as heated, contested, controversial, or anything of the sort. Because it would have been, well, I mean, sure, they lost a couple big ones, but hey, I mean, look at what they're doing to everybody else. I know this because just a year ago, Michigan was playing a rather weak strength of schedule, beating teams by almost the exact same margin of victory as Indiana. And if they had lost to Ohio State, there would have been discussions about whether they could get in the playoff, as Ohio State once did. They lost to Michigan the year before. They were 11-1. They had a couple better wins. But do you think that's what anybody was thinking about at the time? No. This is where the brand bias comes into play. Now, I have a couple thoughts on that particular term. Number one, brand bias absolutely exists in college football. Number two, it matters, and you need to just accept that. Because how did team X, Y, or Z, whether it's Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame, how did they get benefit of the doubt with brand bias? How did they get to the point where they are not questioned, they are not doubted nearly as much as in Indiana, for example, is when they have a strong record but not as great of competition? Go look at Notre Dame's schedule this year. Who's Notre Dame's best win? I know who their loss is, to Northern Illinois. Continues to make less and less sense. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if Indiana had lost to Northern Illinois and been 11-1 otherwise with a strength of schedule? Can you imagine? Boy, a lot of people would have been very upset. But Notre Dame's best win is probably Louisville. All right, that's a solid win. I'm not sitting here and telling you it stinks. Louisville's a pretty good team. That was their best win. They blew out Army and Navy. Army might have been their best win. They blew out Army. That's the American Conference champion. So this whole discussion about the brand bias, yeah, it still matters. We still have a subjective element of the sport, even in the 12-team college football playoff. We're always going to have a subjective element. It's one of the things that, while it drives me insane sometimes, makes me love college football, because you don't have this in the NFL. You have an ability to be on more equal footing when it comes to record, but not all records are created equal in college football. I fully understand and support that. On the other side of the coin, this team or that team getting discounted because, well, they're not that is something that should be pushed back against. But when you're a fan of a particular team, or when you're engaging in these sorts of discussions, understand that brand bias didn't get there by accident. It wasn't random. It wasn't just, oh, I'm going to choose my favorite teams. No, those teams have just been winning for a long time. So as people were familiar with this brand, or we like to go with what we know, with what we're familiar with. And that's what happens in college football. Indiana doesn't have the same brand power as Notre Dame or Michigan or Ohio State or Oregon or anybody else. And that's why there was so much fervent pushback. But the playoff has definitively proven that Indiana should have been in the college football playoff without question. And if we see another Indiana, I'm going to come back and have the same exact take. I want the teams to maximize the importance of the regular season that are the most deserving to get into the playoff, not who we believe are best, but they just had a couple bad games here or there. I thought the committee got it right this year. I think the committee usually gets it right for what I would like to see happen, given the parameters of the college football playoff postseason structure. I hope they continue to get it right. And I hope that Indiana's brand isn't tainted by what happened in South Bend, because, well, that was actually one of the closer playoff games that we have seen this year. So yeah, I'm in Curt Cignetti's camp today. I liked that rant. I liked that one a lot. I might even bring that back in the middle of my reaction show to the national championship game. Speaking of the ACC, I just kind of randomly brought it up there. They might change their championship structure. I mean, good luck, guys. First, a reminder, this episode brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. If you'd pick the Bills to beat the Ravens, boom, $5 to $300 in bonus bets. $300 to keep the action going. Plus, they've got all sorts of lines as it pertains to the college football playoff. They're our official sportsbook sponsor here at the Locked On Network because they are indeed the best. They've got spreads, money line, point totals, everything that you want. Who's going to score a touchdown? Everything you could possibly imagine. Everything you could possibly need. FanDuel's got it. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So big changes are going to be discussed over in the ACC, according to its commissioner, Jim Phillips. Not the Florida State, Clemson want to leave the ACC sort of stuff. That's still That's still an ongoing debacle and such. We'll see how that all plays out. But a couple different people have reported on this matter. So Brandon Marcello tweeted out, interesting idea. ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips brought up with a few of us. Crown the regular season conference champion and reward them with a college football playoff AQ, automatic qualifier. On quote-unquote championship weekend, pit second and third place teams for a spot in the CFP. This year, that would have meant SMU automatically in as the regular season champ, and Miami would have played Clemson as a college football playoff play-in game in the ACC championship game of sorts. So, I understand where Jim Phillips would be coming from here. This is never going to get by the Big Ten or the SEC. What this move reads as to me is an attempt by the ACC to ensure they can keep getting two teams into the playoff. Because they got two teams in this year in a season where I thought the Big 12 and ACC would both be one-bid leagues. Turns out the Big 12 was a one-bid league, and the ACC was a two-bid league thanks to Clemson. But had Clemson lost to SMU in what was a wild and crazy football game, then it would have been a one-bid league this year. And so all these conferences have their own competing interests with the other leagues as they try to put together this playoff and figure out the rules and all this sort of stuff. The more teams you get in the playoff, the more money you get for the conference. It's a pretty simple calculation there for Jim Phillips. His job is to have the strongest league possible and make the most amount of money he possibly can, whether that's in media rights negotiations or keeping certain brands around or getting teams into the playoff. And Greg Sankey has been a master at this for a very long time because his teams have understood how to manipulate the schedules and get themselves into favorable positions so that, hey, you're only going to play 8 conference games. And sure, some of you play a legitimate ACC opponent like South Carolina, Clemson, or Florida State as what would have been your 9th conference game, but some of you are Alabama and you play whoever you want, quite frankly. And it doesn't have to be that tough for everyone. But now it's not true across the board, but there are key examples, Alabama most notably, where that is the case. So the reason I don't see this getting by the SEC and the Big Ten is because after getting just 3 teams into the playoff this year, I don't think Greg Sankey is a happy camper. And look, it's his job to lobby for the conference he is running and argue for its superiority. I am glad the playoff committee for this 2024 season looked at everything at hand and said, yeah, you don't have the same dominance that you used to, so we're not giving the same benefit of the doubt to these 9-3 teams who have too many bad losses. And South Carolina didn't have they got blown out by Ole Miss on their home field, but that's a different kind of bad loss compared to, say, Kentucky or Vanderbilt or Oklahoma or anybody like that. So the ACC trying to get 2 in, coming in the wake of, the SEC not being happy they only got 3 teams in, I don't see how this passes. Because remember, Heather Dinich of ESPN reported that changes to the structure of the college football playoff for 2025 are not going to arrive. So next season, we look like, as of now, we're going to be stuck with the same format we had this year that people were rightly criticizing all over the place, myself included. Because what you had in this year's format was the number 1 seed, Oregon, who had the best regular season, only undefeated team in FBS college football. They did not have the most advantageous path. They had a long layoff. Home playoff game was not afforded to them. And then they had to play a team who's about to go win the national championship game. Now, that's not an excuse for how Oregon played in the Rose Bowl. They got outcoached across the board. Every single coaching matchup, head coach to head coach, OC to DC, and DC to OC. I mean, it was a coaching clinic by this Buckeye staff, why I think they're going to win the national championship game. But that format isn't going anywhere. But then Jim Phillips is saying, well, we could put, an AQ on the regular season champ. Like, whoa. That sounds like a sneaky way for the ACC and Big 12 to lock up 2 teams each getting into the college football playoff. There is no way that flies. So another thing that is being proposed, this according to Pete Thamel over at ESPN, quote, Phillips said the ACC could consider giving its regular season champion a bye and have the teams that finish second or third in the league standings play in the ACC championship game. That's what Brandon Marcello had tweeted out. He said another possibility is having the top 4 teams play on the final weekend of the regular season, first place versus fourth place, and second place versus third place, with the winners playing the following weekend in the ACC championship game. Now, that's more intriguing. What I object to there, because I am a regular season purist sort of guy, is if that's taking place on the last week of the regular season, you're disrupting rivalry week. That's when Clemson plays South Carolina. What if they're in the fold there? You're going to reschedule the South Carolina game? By the way, scheduling-wise, I don't think it's impossible, but that's pretty tricky because you don't know before the year who those 4 teams are going to be. Because remember, he said play on the final weekend of the regular season. So you're going to have teams play 11 games and then in a week's time have to set up all the logistics for an entire week of scheduling. Football schedules are made a long ways in advance. I don't know if that's a hurdle that is incapable of being overcome to enact this sort of plan. But it's certainly a hurdle that popped into my mind. But the bigger one for me is I don't want to disrupt rivalry weekend. I applaud the creativity that is just, these are just proposals, discussions that will take place. I applaud that if you are the ACC. Because I don't think everything in college football as is makes for the best possible product all the time. But that one, I don't think I'm on board with that one. And I don't think the Big Ten or SEC are going to be on board with the first thing where the ACC, which if they were to adopt it, I bet you Brett Yormark would start talking about it over as the commissioner of the Big 12. Don't think that would be something the biggest 2 leagues are going to go for because they want to get most of their teams into the college football playoff, for as many as they can, I should say. So once again, college football needs a commissioner. I would do it. I'd do it. There are a lot of other people that would do it, but I would do it. I want to close with this interesting story. So the transfer portal can be easily circumnavigated. This is a very funny story, quite frankly. So Xavier Lucas is defensive back at Wisconsin. He has now transferred to Miami. So he wanted to transfer. Wisconsin wasn't letting him. There was a paperwork issue. They didn't want him to go. I'm not privy to all the details there. But bottom line is he wasn't able to enter the portal as everybody else was. We seem to have one of these stories every offseason. You know, there was the North Carolina wide receiver that couldn't get eligible for just the dumbest, worst reasons ever and such. And so Lucas wants to transfer. They say no. And then Xavier Lucas realizes, well, what if I just unenroll from the University of Wisconsin and then enroll at the University of Miami? Not as an athlete, as a student. And the NCAA said, yeah, there's nothing we can do about that. So the portal must make it easier. But anytime a player this just goes to show you once again, the transfer portal gets compared to free agency in the NFL. They are not one and the same. In the NFL, players can get franchise tagged. I don't know if that's exactly what Wisconsin was trying to do here. They can get franchise tagged, and then they have to come back and play for that team and whatnot, and they can't go elsewhere. But I just got a kick out of that. That they said, nope, you can't enter the portal. You're not going to be able. So what if I just drop out of school and then start enrolling in a school elsewhere? Well, I guess we can't do anything about that. The NCAA is not long for the road. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.